Hi,
Hi.
everyone. It's my honor to introduce Tomás Ramírez, who's here with us today to discuss peace circles and their integral relation to restorative justice and its history. Currently, Mr. Ramírez is working at the North Lawndale Restorative Justice Court in DePaul University's Peace, Justice, and Conflict Studies program. In addition to that work, Mr. Ramírez is the executive director of Semillas y Raíces, Seeds and Roots in English, a not-for-profit organization focused on cultural preservation, community healing, and youth development. He is also a youth counselor, conflict transformation and reconciliation facilitator, and a cultural sensitivity trainer. Lastly, Mr. Ramirez is a member of the Chichimeca Nation and is a member of various indigenous organizations in the Chicago area. And he serves as a minister for the Native American Church of the Four Directions Lodge. Before I turn it over to Mr. Ramirez, I'd like to note that after his presentation, we'll open it up to a Q&A when there's about 5 to 10 minutes left. If you have any questions, please message me in the chat module and I'll ask them later on. And with that being said, I'll let Mr. Ramirez take it from here. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. Just a quick note, please let me know, because as a good academic, I love to talk and listen to my own voice. So please keep me on task, all right? Other than that, thank you, welcome, good morning, everybody. Quali tonale, Hajeja, those are two different indigenous languages, what I'm saying, good morning. We're going to go on a mini journey. I need to ask you, our work is so serious. It's so serious that we have to be counter-narrative. Therefore, we have to learn to be clowns for peace, and we need to really enjoy and learn to laugh and be joyful to continue to do our work. And it's going to get really serious right now for the next 20 minutes. So question for you, please, thumbs up or raise your hands. How many of you know this amazing piece of Americana, which is called Scooby-Doo? All right, awesome. Now you cannot bail out from me. So because we're going on a journey, I need you to do this with me. We're going to make a transition. All right, so remember Scooby-Doo going from one scene to the other. So here we go. Please raise your hands with me. Come on. Don't be shy. I saw you. All right, come on. Do this with me. All righty, awesome. So now, as you heard before with the previous presenters, restorative justice, or the search to be in right relationship with, for many of us, is not a program, it's not a grant, it's not a certification or project. It's our everyday journey to be in right relationship, which is also part of different warrior traditions. Warrior in a traditional sense means the person who carries the burdens of peace, or the people who are refuge for others. Which, when we're doing this translates into freedom, dignity, land back, personal healing, which also applies to other races, spaces, and times. And any of these healing or resiliency practices come in different shapes and forms, as Michelle was stating. Before we unpack what the circle process is, let's acknowledge something pretty big. Until 1978, and this is like a little trivia for all of us, and I also include myself in a lot of this, because although I do my work-based in community, I work in the academic world. And we get to theorize, talk a lot about these processes, analyze it, but very few times we're on the ground and really look at what's happening and allow that to nurture us. So this is not unique to this time. As was stated already very eloquently by Michelle earlier, transformative healing and restorative practices are rooted in traditional indigenous cultures. And because of that little fact, until 1978, restorative practices, restorative justice practices were a federal crime. We could have gotten locked up by being in a circle process until 1978. Some of us were already alive during that time. Because anything that was an indigenous practice that promoted resiliency, connection, or being in right relationship, a healthy promotion of culture was banned. And it was until 1993 that there was that, like, the Freedom of Religion Act, and Native American Religion Act was ratified, that then we were able to expand a lot more things. So just to keep things in context, nowadays, I mean, and this was not unique to the original nations of this continent. It has happened all over the world, where you have communities who are working to be in right relationship with self, others, institutions, nature, technology, and that which people might call the metaphysical or spiritual. When you have all of this in balance, which is another way to call right relationship, you have sustainable communities. And in a sustainable community, you're going to have cultures that promote peace. Where you have peace, you have culture. Where you have culture, you have peace. And that tells you how much work we still have to do as a nation. But what I want to point out is that when we have that, those spaces, those practices, a few things start to happen. People develop themselves sociopolitically. Translation, they start developing a voice. And if they have a voice, they're able to have influence. And if they have influence, they can change their environment after they first are in right relationship with themselves and transform themselves. And that's when you hear some of these beautiful statements of liberation, of healing. So the restorative practice could be an affirmation. There was a young man by the name of Stephen Biko in South Africa who made this as radical, beautiful, and transformative and healing statement. Black is beautiful. Imagine how powerful that was. I mean, it cost him his life, but nobody could take away something away from him, which was his sense of belonging, his awareness of the self and community, what he was connected to. Translation, he was a dignified human being. And a dignified human being is a real threat to the narrative of power and control. And that's why restorative practices were banned until 1978. And they're still banned in different parts of the world. That's what happens in the circle process. As long as people are able to come together, to share their stories, to hear each other's stories, to see each other being courageous, to witness people being vulnerable, to reflect the best qualities of each other, people are going to know who they are, or they're going to develop new realities. People are going to be resilient. So that's what happens in the circle process. Imagine a little universe where everybody's respected, where everybody gets to tell the story without interruption. So some of you who are judges, I'm pretty sure that you have seen that. I mean, you're conducting your session the best that you can. And there's always an angry young person who's really frustrated, and you're trying to understand, like, what's happening? It's because they don't understand our legal protocols, but the main thing is that they want to tell their story. They want to tell their story. They want to explain themselves. That doesn't mean that things are not gonna change or they're not gonna deal with some specific consequences or accountability. More on that soon. What is that? Because people don't get to tell the story. One of the most powerful things that we have when people come to the circle process in the North Orlando Restorative Justice Court is that in the first session, our participants in the circle get to tell their story and to see how radically different it is from other settings. Especially when we are really honest, we operate in historical context where the erasure of people's stories or the punishment towards some bodies specifically with darker pigmentation has been a lot of the focus of this accountability process or this punishment, of this retribution or these justice systems or structures. is one of the most radical things. That's when they start working on their freedom, their resiliency, their dignity, and awareness of the self. So all of that happens even in just one sitting. So in the circle process, everybody is the same. Everybody, that's why we sit in circle. So it takes away a lot of the hierarchy. One of the most beautiful things that we witness also in the restorative justice courts is that everybody sits in circle, a new person shows up, a new participant shows up, and they start to freak out. What on earth is going on? Whoa, 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 like everybody's in circle. I'm at the same level, you know. I mean, don't tell anybody, but we might be even in violation of some code when even our judge sits at the same level. I mean, I don't know. Those of you who work in the legal field should be more aware of that. Not me. I'm just a clown. Then even there are little power distance messages that we get because we live in a highly hierarchical environment. So when you're in the circle, that does not exist. I'll give you a very tangible example, one more tangible example of this. When you come to our court in Orlando, our current judge Spratt, is not wearing her robe. Talk about being with the people. Now, this is one of the super radical things, which is highly welcome, because all of a sudden, you don't feel that right away, you know? Let's say we internalize hierarchy a lot. I see my aunties or my mom, and right away I start listening like, oh, like I did something wrong. Imagine when we're in different settings where there's a lot of hierarchy. So the circle process, just by sitting in the circle, allows us to look at each other, not hide. I mean, you were a student like me in high school, you will hide in the deepest corner, so you will not be called upon or you didn't have to participate. That does not happen in this circle. The spiritual aspects of everybody's life are accepted, are invited. We start the circle. One of the components of circle process is that we actually engage in a ceremony, an opening and an acknowledgement. I'll talk more about it in a second. And different people have different practices. You know, you have people who are from different churches who might read from a sacred text. Personally, we do traditional songs. So somebody else might say a specific prayer. My friends from Circles and Ciphers, they're into hip hop a little bit. Now, so they're really good in coming up with some rhymes, but we have our ceremony, we have our acknowledgement through that. So being in circle, our little acknowledgement, and we can start focusing on things such as making decisions together, transforming a conflict. We could analyze a situation that resulted in harm being created or caused. Maybe develop cohesion as a team. There's a beautiful team that is here today. I'm going to give them a shout out, the Peace Ambassadors. You get to hear from some of them later today. We also get to share difficulties. And the main things that we get to learn from each other's human experiences, the good and the not so good. All of that happens in the circle process. At the same time, let me get on a little bit more academic or a clinician perspective. As people are like really analyzing their metacognition, you know, the way that they thinking about the way in which they think, they start going through a process that also starts developing a more conscious voice, awareness of their communities, and their connections at all these different levels of conflict or the opportunities to be in right relationship. Real fast. Self, others, and these are huge. Self, others, institutions, nature, technology, that which we might call spiritual. You know, so and all of these create sustainable communities. When this starts to happen, is those bonds, those relationships, those balanced relationships that allow us to be very courageous, to take very specific steps into new directions or all directions and recover or reclaim the best part of ourselves. So the circle process is really strong because it can really contain anger, frustration, joy, pain, truth. Look, I am your father. Imagine that in a circle process. Um, uh, the very diverse worldviews, very intense feelings. Man, I don't like you to wear your Green Bay Packers jersey in my house. Very intense. By the way, like as you can see, all these processes have very real life applications. Um, and we also, the circle is strong enough to contain silence. As a society, we're overstimulated, and we don't know how to be in silence. When I have fun, go to a law class and just be quiet. That is a little shade throw into my friends in law school. And I already spoke to some of these. Hey, God, please keep me on task because I just start going off. All right. You have our sitting circle, we have our ceremony, we have our talking piece, we have our facilitators. Some people are very specific about guidelines or specific protocols, and then we take it out for a spin. My good friend Steve Bayer, shout out to his book Talking Stick, and also John Paul Lederach. Little book of conflict transformation. That's a really great resource, really easy and affordable for your students. Address the intentions of the circle process, which are to speak devoutly from your heart, to listen devoutly from your heart, to speak spontaneously, and to be of lean expression. I complement it with a lot of my traditional teachings, which focus on 3 basic human needs. And most healing, transformational, and restorative processes will have this, or will address these 3 needs. The need for inclusion, put me in, coach. I want to be part of something. A lot of young people join alternative social clubs because of this need of inclusion. And this has another way of being in relationship. We're communal beings, and these processes are based in community. And some people may say, hey, Tomás, I know this old man that lives in the middle of nowhere in Idaho, in the mountain, whatever. Like, oh, that person is in community. That person is in right relationship. So inclusion. Then there's a part of acknowledgement or recognition. That's another human need that we have. How many of you have seen, I love to ask this question, especially when we have a lot of students around. How many of you have seen the movie Avatar? Raise your hand. All right, the blue guys, not the airbender. All right, awesome. Real fast. How do the Navi greet each other? Michelle, they gave you a clue earlier when she was talking about Ubuntu. How do they greet each other? What do they say? You already confessed that you have seen the movies. Your credibility has. Yes, Professor Lubansky, I see you, absolutely. I am you, you're another me. When I recognize you, when I acknowledge you, I'm fully seeing you, Paul first said, hey, you're fully human. Some of us who are a little more seasoned and have a few more gray hairs will see a phenomenon that around downtown in the 90s where you stop a yellow cab, you stop the cab, and then somebody else just gets in there. That's not seeing someone, Uber and Lyft have taken away that phenomenon. You cannot longer study that as much. I'm pretty sure it still happens. Or the experience with a homeless person, that we don't just spend the time to acknowledge their humanity, like they didn't exist. And we could even argue that we have a caste system in this nation at its core where we are learning to not see each other. So inclusion, acknowledgement, that's when you're able to, regardless of who they are, you get to tell to that young person who has behavioral issues, You're contributing to something. You're important to me. I respect you. I care for you. You know, that's when you're an educator, you might be able to say something pretty radical like, hey, thank you. Class, please forgive me. I was out of place, you know, and things like that. I have a whole workshop for educators that's based on those simple words. Um, Inclusion, acknowledgement, or, or affirmation. And then we have the need of having the opportunity to contribute. Nothing's changed a person more like the ability to contribute to somebody. So I'm an educator in two very different settings. I work with young people who are, like, say, in alternative social clubs, and I also have the joy to pretend to teach at the Paul University. Mostly I have a lot of fun. And I'm becoming an old dude, you know, a very duderish dude. And I ask them, yeah, I'm here to lecture, etc. But at the same time, I'm here to uh, have you tell me what's relevant to you, what's important to you, especially when it's about music, maybe fashion. Educate is all good. Contribute to my world, contribute to my education, contribute to my development. Or when I was a high school teacher once upon a time for a little bit, you know, I'll ask Huey to be in charge of the well-being or the safety of the classroom, or ask Huey to make sure that everybody was acknowledged or that everybody was fed, is magical. That's why in the repair of harm agreements that we develop for court or other processes, we have people engaging with community, not to just go clean 50 toilet bowls, you know, and make them all shiny, but to engage in something that you really contribute. So we have had people support elders, do giveaways for family. We had somebody who created a beautiful chair, table that then gave to a church for raffling. We all have the opportunity to contribute. And when we have all of these needs fulfilled, we're more open to be vulnerable. We're open to be courageous, to be called upon our not so good behavior, because we understand that we're all going to be safe from harm, or that the harm that was done is going to be acknowledged. A lot of us, through the events that have happened in our society since last summer, we no longer feel that we're gaslighted. You know, like, oh, this kind of behavior towards people of color does exist. You know, it's not like pretending anymore, or it's not hiding it. We get to mend those broken relationships. We get to affirm our community values. And this is the beautiful part, to reintegrate people involved in the heart back into the community. I know I didn't really go into a lot of specific things. We don't have a lot of time. We need 3 hours. But what I invite anybody is to just participate in a circle process. And as we learn these processes, and the more that we interact with people and we see them being vulnerable and put their hearts, their hopes in our hands as facilitators, that's why I'm really happy that Michelle may start making the distinction between keepers and makers. You know, and we cannot keep a lead on human emotion and the human condition. So as a circle facilitator, when we are witnessing all of this, the main key for all of us as practitioners is to be humble, because who are we to witness that? Even from a spiritual perspective, that's the most beautiful manifestation of the human spirit. Sorry, I'm gonna cut it there because there might be some questions. And sorry, go for it, Kyle. Whatever people throw at us.
Okay, so having not seen a question in the chat, I'd like to open the floor up to anybody to raise their hand if you have a question.
All right. Go ahead, Kyle.
Carla has her hand up.
I was wondering how you deal with anger, since that seems to be a huge emotion. I wonder how anger is dealt in a piece in a circle.
You let it be. we don't have to respond in a specific way. And a lot of times, so I deal with a lot of college students. So I talk about them about consuming specific beverages responsibly. And I theorize about how, I mean, not that happens at the UFC, I mean, but we might have a few things like that on my campus. But they might consume a little too much of whatever, and at some point they don't feel good. It's the same thing with emotions. We're used to operate with maybe like 3 or 4 emotions. So as we have these emotions, we're under the influence of these emotions, we have to release them. We have to express them. That's why one of the main goals for the circle process is not there, it's not explicit, but is to be develop ourselves emotionally and to be fully emotionally expressed, which in return is going to give you a healthier human being, even how we carry ourselves. So you let it out. You let it out. It needs to come out. It's our need to be needed or to just be engaged that we think that something has to happen. Once it gets out of the way, it's mostly because people are hiding an emotional gap. Maybe they're not being acknowledged in their harm that was done to them. Maybe they were not invited to the party. Maybe they're really sad, you know. I have a course on conflict transformation that I call Jedi Academy, and I really ask the question about how Anakin Skywalker became Darth Vader. Ultimately, he was afraid, and he turned to the dark side, and he was really angry. You let it out, you balance yourself. Go for it.
From Adonis Platt, he asks, what do you think is needed in community, families, and ourselves for circles to start?
Just to butt in, I'm sorry. We have, I think, time for one more question after this, and then we're going to go to breakout rooms.
All right. Mr. Adonis Platt knows the answer because he's one of the best young practitioners that we have in the city. So he's just being mean to me. No, no. So the main thing is to have the willingness to be unreasonable, to not listen to those to the conditioning that we have about things cannot change, things cannot take place, or I have this against me. So a lot of the work has to be very unreasonable in order for things to happen. What is wrong is that we have an expectation of how these things are going to look. That's why restorative practices are really hard for a lot of people who are very pragmatic, because the process the processes are what are transforming the community, and in that process, there's a lot of new meaning, a lot of development that takes place more than to have that goal. You know, that's why Michelle say, hey, you have to look at the ocean, not the island that is across the ocean. Sorry, one more question.
Judge Ocasio has his hand up, had his hand up first. Judge Ocasio?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I love that you mentioned Steve Biko, but he lived in a different era where there was an openly repressive and notoriously segregated sort of community. We're living kind of through a different age. We're living in an age where, you know, there's disproportionate outcomes for Black and brown youth that are being brought into the criminal justice system. You know, how do you imagine us implementing restorative justice principle in this current context where we have the existence of racism, but without races, without the ugly face of bigotry and hate, although it's arising much more often than it did in the past where we had a more neoliberal sort of perspectives?
Thank you so much for that question. And this is something that I've been working with for a long time and busting my head, especially when I hit the wall, because you're right. You're absolutely right. I mean, it's like, as the Zapatistas will say, we're in a world where many different worlds take place, because there are some places where it's purely neoliberalist. There are some places where, honestly, someone like me cannot take a walk without being stopped. I mean, so we live in a continuum with all these different spectrums of violence and oppression still exist, even with the same city. So the way that I look at it is we are operating in 3 different environments when we're trying to implement restorative justice processes. And in the 3 of them, beautiful work can be done. It's just in the 3 of them, amazing transformation and healing takes place. We have institutions that are very rigorous, I mean, very rigid, where even vocabulary is still very punitive. We're talking about perpetrator, offender, and where there's not a lot of room for culture, it's very restrictive. But just like it happens in any setting, that, I mean, some schools are part of this, even some CPS schools still have this, where amazing people are able to create little islands of transformation, but they're very restrictive around vocabulary, the risks that they take, and the opportunities they have to create those spaces. Then you have something that would be more like a third space, or like the non-for-profit world, but not all third places are non-for-profit worlds, where you are a lot more open. You start to have a lot more cultural practices, which translate into bringing the culture of the community or the environment into the process, which doesn't happen in the highly institutional environment. And that's when you're able to take more risk, use more of the actual cultural values, and but they're really restrictive. You have specific timelines, you have specific funding sources. You have some specific goals that you're accountable to. And then we have what will be literally being in the periphery, or in the margins of society, which is where a lot of the beautiful work takes place every day. You're gonna have Father Kelly, you're gonna have some of the people from Circles and Ciphers. There's a lot of work that happens every day on restorative practices that literally saves people's lives. We never hear about it. That's where you have the gang intervention programs. Those are our restorative experts. They understand relationships. The language, it has to be completely connected to the community. The cultural practitioners are essential to be able to facilitate those processes. And that's where literally people's lives get saved out of this process. Sorry, we could be talking about this one a lot, but thank you so much, because that's an essential part that we need to bring up to the conversation, because there are at least three different environments where the work is taking place in this society.
All right, and now we're going to shift to breakout rooms.